The courtroom is supposed to be a sanctuary. It is a place where truth is sought, where justice is dispensed fairly, without fear or favor. We place immense trust in the men and women who wear the black robes, believing they stand as impartial arbiters of the law. But what happens when that sacred trust is violated? What occurs when the very individuals sworn to uphold justice use their power not for the public good, but for personal gain, for family, for friends? The story of Judge Mario Battelli of Totowa, New Jersey is a stark reminder that even the most revered institutions can be tainted by human failing, and the shadow cast by a compromised gavel can stretch far and wide, obscuring the very light of justice it is meant to reflect. This is not just a tale of one man's missteps, it is an examination of the system that allowed it. In the small borough of Totowa, New Jersey, Municipal Judge Mario A. Battelli was a figure of authority, a man entrusted with judicial power. Admitted to the New Jersey bar in 1998, his role as a part-time judge placed him in a position to impact lives, to make decisions that carried the weight of the law. The municipal building, located at 537 Totowa Road, should have been a symbol of fairness. Instead, it became the backdrop for a scandal that would raise uncomfortable questions about integrity and influence. The power vested in a judge is immense, a tool to be wielded with caution and impartiality. When that tool is misused, the damage extends beyond the immediate parties involved, shaking the public's faith in the entire judicial process. The events that unfolded around Judge Battelli were not a complex, high-stakes conspiracy hatched in shadowy backrooms. Instead, they began with something far more common: a family dispute, a disagreement with a contractor. It is precisely this ordinariness that makes the subsequent abuse of power so unsettling. It suggests that the temptation to misuse authority can arise from everyday situations, transforming a personal problem into a matter of public concern and judicial misconduct. The ease with which Judge Battelli seemingly crossed ethical lines serves as a chilling narrative, one that forces us to consider the vulnerabilities within our legal system and the character of those we appoint to safeguard it. This account delves into the specifics of Judge Battelli's actions, the investigation that followed, and the consequences, or lack thereof, that ensued. It is a story that demands attention, not for sensationalism, but for the critical lessons it imparts about accountability, transparency, and the ever-present need for vigilance. When a judge falters, the tremors are felt throughout the community, prompting citizens to question whether the scales of justice are truly balanced, or if they can be tipped by the thumb of someone in a position of power. The pursuit of justice requires unwavering integrity, and anything less is a betrayal. The genesis of Judge Battelli's ethical downfall can be traced to a seemingly mundane conflict, the kind that plays out in countless neighborhoods. Prior to December 3, 2013, Judge Battelli's brother, Eugene Battelli, and his sister-in-law, Annalisa Battelli, along with Annalisa's father, Pasquale DePinto, found themselves embroiled in a frustrating situation. They were experiencing significant difficulties with a contractor named Anthony Pizza. The heart of their grievance was familiar home renovations had been started. Mr. Pizza had reportedly been paid a substantial sum of money, but the work remained woefully incomplete. Such disputes are typically the domain of civil courts, a battle over contracts and services rendered, not the criminal justice system. It was into this simmering family frustration that Judge Mario Battelli stepped, not merely as a concerned relative offering sympathetic words, but as a legal mind armed with the authority and knowledge of his judicial office. He engaged in discussions with Eugene and Annalisa about their troubles with Mr. Pizza. This in itself might seem innocuous. However, the nature of his involvement soon escalated beyond simple family commiseration. He began to actively advise them on legal strategy, pushing the boundaries of his judicial role. He was no longer just Mario, the brother and brother-in-law. He was Judge Battelli, offering counsel that carried the implicit weight of his position on the bench. The critical turning point came when Judge Battelli advised Annalisa Battelli that she or her father could, and perhaps should, pursue a course of action that would transform their civil grievance into a criminal matter. He specifically suggested that they could file charges against Mr. Pizza at the Wayne Police Department or directly at the Wayne Municipal Court. This advice was not a general suggestion to seek legal counsel. It was targeted guidance from a sitting judge, directing his family members towards a specific and arguably aggressive legal avenue. This was the moment the line between personal involvement and judicial overreach began to blur significantly. This intervention set the stage for a series of actions that would draw scrutiny and condemnation. By counseling his family to pursue criminal charges in a dispute that appeared largely contractual, Judge Batelli was steering them towards leveraging the power of the state in a private quarrel. His legal expertise, which should have been reserved for his official duties, or offered with extreme caution to avoid any appearance of impropriety, was now being deployed to benefit his relatives. The seeds of misconduct were sown in these early conversations, where family loyalty seemingly overshadowed judicial ethics, paving the way for more overt abuses of his position. The transition from verbal advice to documented instruction marked a significant escalation in Judge Batelli's improper involvement. On December 3, 2013, Judge Batelli took a definitive step that would later become a cornerstone of the misconduct investigation. He composed and sent an email to his sister-in-law, Annalisa Batelli. This was no ordinary email offering vague support. Instead, it was a detailed, prescriptive list, a veritable menu of potential criminal charges that Pasquale DePinto, his sister-in-law's father, could file against the contractor, Anthony Pizza. The email meticulously listed 7 distinct NJS 2C charges, which are New Jersey's criminal code citations. He was, in effect, drafting a prosecution strategy for his family. The content of this email was strikingly specific and revealed a clear intent to use his legal knowledge for his family's private battle. Beyond just listing statutory codes, Judge Batelli provided pointed, strategic advice. He wrote, "All of the above are for your dad. You can charge NJS 2C215 for the bad check given to Wayne for the permits which you had to pay." This demonstrated not only his willingness to identify charges but also his direction on who should file them, and for what specific alleged transgressions. It was a level of involvement far exceeding what one might expect from a concerned family member, clearly leveraging his professional understanding of the criminal justice system for a personal vendetta. Furthermore, the email contained an even more alarming piece of instruction, one that hinted at a willingness to exploit official channels for unofficial purposes. Judge Batelli advised Annalisa, "Ask the detective to run a CCH which will show other criminal charges including the recent indictment for a $50,000 bad check. Good luck." A CCH, or computerized criminal history, is a confidential record. Suggesting its use in this context to bolster a private complaint being orchestrated by his family was a deeply problematic directive coming from a judge. It was a clear signal that he was prepared to guide his family in using tools of the state for their benefit. The existence of this email transformed the situation from a private conversation to a documented act of judicial overreach. It provided concrete evidence of Judge Batelli's efforts to arm his relatives with specific legal ammunition, effectively acting as their private counsel while wearing the implicit authority of his judicial robe. This wasn't just friendly advice, it was a calculated move, a judge meticulously outlining how to bring the weight of the criminal justice system down upon an individual with whom his family had a civil dispute. The good luck at the end seemed almost a perfunctory closing to a meticulously crafted plan of attack. Armed with Judge Batelli's detailed instructions, the family proceeded to act. On December 15, 2013, nearly 2 weeks after receiving the judge's strategic email, Eugene Batelli, the judge's brother, made his way to the Wayne Township Police Department. He intended to file a report concerning what he described as Mr. Pizza's harassing behavior. However, the police at Wayne Township, perhaps sensing the contractual nature of the underlying dispute or following standard procedure, advised him that the more appropriate course of action would be for Mr. DePinto, the party who had directly contracted with Pizza, to file a formal complaint at the Wayne Township Municipal Court itself. This interaction highlighted the initial filter the justice system often applies to such matters. The very next day, December 16, 2013, Annalisa Batelli and her father Pasquale DePinto appeared at the violations window of the Wayne Township Municipal Court. They were there with a clear purpose to file the criminal charges against Mr. Pizza, charges that had been carefully curated and provided by Judge Mario Batelli. They were not merely aggrieved citizens seeking guidance. They arrived with a prepackaged case, courtesy of a sitting judge. This move represented the direct implementation of Judge Batelli's off-the-books legal assistance, bringing his private influence into the public forum of the court system, albeit in a neighboring jurisdiction. The encounter at the violations window proved to be revealing. The Wayne Township Court Administrator, upon hearing the details of their complaint against Mr. Pizza, expressed a professional opinion. She suggested that the core issue stemming from an incomplete renovation contract might more appropriately be classified as a civil matter rather than a criminal one. This is a common distinction where breaches of contract are pursued through civil litigation for damages, not criminal prosecution. Many such disputes end here, diverted to the correct legal path. However, Annalisa Batelli was not easily deterred, armed as she was with what she believed to be authoritative advice. In response to the court administrator's assessment, Annalisa Batelli invoked her brother-in-law's status in a way that left little doubt about the source of her confidence and her list of charges. She stated, "No, my brother-in-law is a judge and he should know. He gave me the charges my father is to sign." To substantiate her claim and the legitimacy of the charges she sought to file, she then provided the court administrator with the very email Judge Batelli had sent on December 3rd. The judge's name and his official position were now being explicitly used to pressure court staff and lend weight to their complaint, a clear attempt to leverage his authority. The court administrator, faced with this, then provided them with a certification in support of probable cause, which they completed, listing 6 NJS 2C charges. Section 5. Breaching the walls of confidentiality, the CCH misuse. While Judge Batelli's email providing a list of criminal charges was a serious ethical lapse, his next action plunged him deeper into misconduct, crossing a line into the misuse of official powers for undeniably personal reasons. Beyond merely advising his family, Judge Batelli took it upon himself to access Anthony Pizza's computerized criminal history, or CCH. This CCH is a highly confidential report, meticulously maintained by the New Jersey State Police. It contains sensitive information about an individual's interactions with the criminal justice system, including arrests and convictions. Access to such a database is strictly controlled for very good reasons. The rules governing access to CCH reports are clear and unambiguous. Judges and other authorized personnel are permitted to access these confidential databases solely for the proper administration of criminal justice. This means using the information for legitimate official court business, such as during bail hearings, sentencing, or other judicial proceedings directly related to cases before them. Judge Batelli's inquiry into Anthony Pizza's CCH, however, had absolutely nothing to do with any case pending in his Totowa Municipal Court. He sought this information purely for personal reasons, directly linked to his family's private dispute with the contractor. This was a flagrant abuse of the privileges afforded to him by his judicial position. The act of accessing Pizza's CCH was carried out through the Totowa Police Department, the very municipality where Judge Batelli presided. This detail underscores the ease with which he could potentially leverage his local influence and official connections to obtain information that should have been well beyond his legitimate reach for such purposes. He was not acting as Judge Batelli in the service of Totowa's justice system. He was acting as Mario Batelli, using the tools of his office to dig up dirt on his family's adversary. This action demonstrated a profound disregard for the strict protocols designed to protect citizens' private information from unwarranted intrusion by state actors. This unauthorized access to confidential records represented a significant breach of trust and a violation of established legal and ethical boundaries. It wasn't just about giving advice anymore. It was about actively using the power and resources of his judicial office to gain an unfair advantage in a private matter. The CCH system is a powerful tool for law enforcement and the courts, but its integrity depends on it being used responsibly and only for its intended purposes. Judge Batelli's decision to exploit this system for his family's benefit compromised that integrity and exposed a troubling willingness to overstep his authority in a substantial way. Section 6. The Watchful Eye. Unraveling the Threads of Misconduct. The actions of Judge Batelli, particularly the confident assertion by his sister-in-law at the Wayne Municipal Court, and the presentation of his incriminating email, did not go unnoticed indefinitely. Eventually these troubling events came to the attention of the appropriate oversight body, the Advisory Committee on Judicial Conduct, or ACJC. This committee is tasked with the solemn responsibility of investigating allegations of misconduct against judges within the state of New Jersey, acting as the judiciary's internal affairs mechanism. The disciplinary counsel for the committee, Tracy H. Gelbstein, would play a key role in examining the evidence and recommending findings regarding Judge Batelli's behavior. The investigation undertaken by the ACJC would have involved a careful review of the facts, likely triggered by a complaint. Perhaps the Wayne Township Court Administrator, upon receiving the judge's email from Annalisa Batelli, felt compelled to report the unusual and potentially improper intervention. Regardless of the exact trigger, the committee meticulously gathered evidence. This would include the email itself, testimony from the individuals involved, and records pertaining to Judge Batelli's access of the confidential CCH database. The committee's purpose was to determine whether the judge's actions violated the canons of judicial ethics, which demand impartiality, integrity, and the avoidance of even the appearance of impropriety. The ACJC's findings were nuanced yet ultimately damning in key respects. The committee considered the act of Judge Batelli emailing the list of potential criminal charges to his sister-in-law. While this was undoubtedly poor judgment and showed a lack of discretion, the committee, in its formal findings, concluded that this particular act, in isolation, did not definitively constitute a misuse of his judicial office to advance private interests. This part of the finding might seem surprising to some, given the detailed nature of the legal advice provided by a sitting judge to his family for a private dispute. It suggests a high bar for what constitutes direct misuse in such advisory contexts. However, the committee's view on Judge Batelli's other transgression was far more severe and unambiguous. They found that his actions in accessing Anthony Pizza's computerized criminal history, or CCH, from the Totowa Police Department for purely personal reasons, related to his family's dispute with the contractor, was indeed a clear and serious violation of judicial ethics. This act, the committee determined, unequivocally constituted using his judicial office and the resources attendant to it to advance his family's private interests. This finding drew a sharp line, indicating that while giving advice might be debatable, actively using official powers to obtain confidential information was an undeniable abuse. Section 7. A slap on the wrist, the committee's measured verdict. Following its thorough investigation, the Advisory Committee on Judicial Conduct reached a definitive conclusion regarding Judge Mario Batelli's behavior. The committee formally found that Judge Batelli had indeed violated the ethical rules that bind every judge in New Jersey. Specifically, they determined that by accessing Anthony Pizza's confidential criminal history, or CCH, for personal reasons, to aid his relatives in their private dispute with the contractor, he had improperly used his judicial office to advance private interests. This was a significant finding, acknowledging a serious breach of the public trust and the Code of Judicial Conduct, which demands that judges remain impartial and avoid exploiting their positions for personal gain. Based on this finding of unethical conduct, the committee recommended disciplinary action. The New Jersey Supreme Court ultimately imposed the sanction. Judge Batelli was suspended from his judicial duties without pay for a period of 1 month. This suspension was served from June 27, 2016 to July 27, 2016. For 30 days, Judge Batelli was barred from the bench, a public censure for his actions. While any suspension represents a mark against a judge's record, the brevity of this particular sanction, just 1 month, raised eyebrows and sparked debate among legal observers and the public alike regarding its adequacy for such a clear abuse of power. Many observers questioned whether a 1-month suspension was a proportionate response to the severity of Judge Batelli's misconduct. He had not only given inappropriate legal advice to his family, but had also actively used his official position to access confidential state records for their benefit. Critics argued that such actions strike at the very heart of judicial integrity and warrant a more substantial penalty to deter similar behavior from others in positions of trust. The suspension, while a form of punishment, felt to some like a mere slap on the wrist, especially considering the potential damage to public confidence in the judiciary. Interestingly, the ACJC did not stop at just recommending a suspension. Recognizing the potentially criminal nature of Judge Batelli's actions in unlawfully accessing the CCH database, the committee also took the step of referring the matter to appropriate authorities for further investigation and potential criminal prosecution. This referral acknowledged that accessing confidential state records without authorization could constitute a crime, separate and distinct from the ethical violations handled by the Judicial Conduct Committee. This added a layer of seriousness, though the immediate disciplinary action from the judiciary itself remained the 1-month suspension, leaving the prospect of criminal charges to other agencies. Section 8. No bars for the robed leniency, outcry, and lingering doubts. Despite the Advisory Committee on Judicial Conduct's referral of Judge Batelli's unauthorized access of the computerized criminal history to other authorities for potential criminal investigation, a stark reality emerged from the entire affair. Judge Mario Batelli did not serve any jail or prison time for his actions. The 1-month suspension without pay was the primary tangible consequence he faced directly from the judicial oversight system for misusing his position and breaching confidential records. This outcome, or lack of a more severe one, became a focal point for public criticism and fueled perceptions of a two-tiered justice system. The leniency shown towards Judge Batelli resonated poorly with a public increasingly wary of official misconduct and disparities in how the law is applied. Many people questioned whether an ordinary citizen, caught accessing confidential state police records for personal reasons, would have been treated so mildly. The concern was that individuals in positions of power, particularly within the legal system itself, might be shielded by a protective cloak, receiving gentler treatment than those outside the privileged circle. Claims of a biased justice system, favoritism, and officials protecting their own began to circulate, further damaging the already fragile trust between the public and the institutions meant to serve them. The comparison is indeed stark. Unauthorized access to sensitive databases can carry significant penalties for members of the general public, potentially including hefty fines and imprisonment, depending on the nature of the information and the intent behind the access. The fact that a judge, who is expected to embody the highest standards of legal and ethical behavior, faced only a temporary removal from his duties for such a breach, seemed to many to be an insufficient deterrent. It fostered a sense that the system was more concerned with appearances than with genuine accountability for those within its own ranks who transgress. This perceived leniency in Judge Batelli's case contributes to a broader narrative of concern about judicial accountability. When judges are seen to escape serious consequences for actions that would land ordinary citizens in significant legal trouble, it naturally leads to questions about whether the system is capable of policing itself effectively. The absence of more severe penalties can create a lingering doubt in the public mind. Are all individuals truly equal before the law? Or do the robes of a judge confer a degree of immunity not available to others? This case, for many, suggested the latter, leaving a bitter taste and a sense that justice was not fully served. Section 9. The cracks in the foundation, corruption, bias, and the erosion of public trust. The saga of Judge Mario Batelli is more than just an isolated incident of one man's poor judgment in Totowa, New Jersey. It serves as a potent illustration of the broader, systemic vulnerabilities that can exist within any justice system. When a judicial officer entrusted with upholding the law uses their position to assist family in a private dispute, advises them on filing criminal charges, and improperly accesses confidential information, it sends a disturbing message. It suggests that the scales of justice can indeed be tampered with, that personal connections and official status might outweigh fairness and impartiality. Such actions inevitably plant seeds of doubt about potential corruption and bias. This single case resonates with wider anxieties concerning judicial misconduct across the nation and globally. Each instance of a judge stepping outside the bounds of ethical conduct chips away at the foundation of public faith in the legal system as a whole. The judiciary relies heavily on its perceived legitimacy and the trust of the people it serves. When that trust is eroded by incidents like the Batelli scandal, the damage can be extensive and difficult to repair. It encourages a cynical view where people might believe that who you know or what position you hold matters more than the facts of a case or the principles of law. The perception of a two-tiered system, one for the powerful and connected and another for everyone else, is incredibly corrosive. If a judge can misuse their authority to access confidential records for personal gain and face what many consider a lenient penalty, it reinforces the idea that accountability is not uniformly applied. This fosters an environment where citizens may become disillusioned and disengaged, believing the system is inherently unfair. The integrity of legal authorities is paramount, and incidents like these provide ammunition to those who argue that the system is rigged or at the very least, deeply flawed and susceptible to insider influence. Ultimately, the story of Judge Patelli and its aftermath underscores the critical need for robust oversight, unwavering transparency, and meaningful accountability for all members of the judiciary. It is not enough to simply have codes of conduct. These codes must be enforced rigorously, and with consequences that truly reflect the severity of the misconduct. Restoring and maintaining public trust requires a constant commitment to ethical behavior and a clear demonstration that no one, regardless of their title or position, is above the law. Only then can the cracks in the foundation of justice begin to heal, ensuring the system serves everyone equitably.